When you hear the name Aladdin, what do you think of? Probably this guy, right? The Disney classic. I was right there with you until I watched Magi and got to know the much cooler Aladdin, this little guy right here. I just gotta say thank you real quick to my friend Steve for recommending this show to me. It was so much better than I even imagined. Time and time again, it surprised me, it impressed me. So what's Magi about? Well, Magi takes all these characters, these familiar names from ancient Middle Eastern folklore, like Aladdin, Alibaba, Sinbad, so many others, and it kind of gives them the anime treatment. It puts a new spin on these characters and these stories of old. The show starts out with Alibaba, who's kind of our main protagonist. He's just sort of this typical shonen protagonist. He's kind of like a crybaby, but he's a good-hearted individual who eventually becomes this super strong hero by the end of things. But he's this good guy. He's kind of wanting to go on an adventure, and he's trying to conquer this dungeon. There are these dungeons in the world, and these are summoned by the Magi. And there are like 4 Magi's in here. Aladdin is one of them. By chance, Aladdin runs into him. They decide to go into this dungeon together, and these dungeons, I don't know why they're called dungeons, because they're like towers that are just shooting up out of the ground, but they're filled with all kinds of terrible, dangerous monsters. Most of the people who go in there end up dying and never coming back, but they're full of monsters and treasure, and the treasure is a magical item called a metal vessel, which contains a genie, or a jinn as they're called in this series. Now Aladdin, being a Magi, he can actually summon these jinns, and he has this metal flute that contains this awesome, powerful, headless genie who can just smash everything and wreak havoc and gives him all sorts of powers. But the Magi pretty much are these magical beings. They have basically an unlimited amount of magical aptitude, and they gain magic from the world around them, but their physical bodies can be weak, but they have all this magic potential. Aladdin starts out not really knowing what a Magi is, and I'm not going to tell you too much either. I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, but he doesn't really know who he is or what he's supposed to be doing at first, and he kind of learns that along the way. You can say that with all the characters. Alibaba doesn't really know where he's going, and we don't know much about where he came from until later on. But I will say that the backstories of these characters really get fleshed out, and they're just so good. All the characters in the series are just so darn good. They run into Morgiana, who is a slave, and she comes from this tribe of like super powerful people who have superhuman strength, and they basically set her free, and she ends up joining them. And she's probably my favorite character, honestly. She's just super cool and good waifu material. But anyways, sounds like your typical shonen setup, right? But you know what? This series gets surprisingly deep and dark, and it really isn't afraid to explore the darkness of humanity, the dark aspects of society, kind of human atrocities like slavery, like corrupt political systems. We see time and time again just how the royalty, the wealthy clash with the common folk, and how the common people are being taken advantage of. And another cool thing about this, a really impressive thing about this show, is how it explores the villains, the bad guys in this. It really looks into what made them the way they are, what drove them into doing these terrible things. And we see their backstories, and we can almost empathize with the villains because we see all the crap that they went through and the horrible things that were part of their lives that drove them into villainy. Sometimes we actually grow to like these horrible characters. Sometimes they become heroes in the end, sometimes they become good guys, or they find some sort of redemption. If not, then yeah, we see, oh, well, that sucks, because really it was this other person's fault for controlling this person in this way and making them act that way. We see the villain behind the villain behind the villain, and I think that's all very fascinating and just so well written, so well done. Time and time again, this show shows you some awful things. It makes you hate this character, and then it makes you forgive that character, and then it makes you love that character, or at least not hate them anymore. Besides all that, you know, there's all the typical action shonen anime goodness. Tons of cool fight scenes, fun, lovable characters, hilarious moments, an overall lighthearted vibe, but that turns so quickly into some very dark territory and kind of jumps back and forth between that playful nature and that very kind of depressing stuff. And we see the characters just getting stronger and stronger and having all these different powers, and it's really amazing. I swear to you, I have never been so excited about politics as the political arc in this show. There's a small political arc where these, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a political arc in here, and it is so exciting. Like, oh, they're setting up a new government. Oh, they're going to overthrow this guy. Or maybe not. I'm not spoiling anything. Anyways, there are lots of corrupt kingdoms and organizations in here, and just all kinds of stuff that gets explored here, and you hope that they just change the whole world and they save everything. Not gonna say too much, but you know, all the characters are so good in this. Yeah, the villains are like next level villains, but the heroes too, you love each and every one of them. And Alibaba, like I say, is this crybaby wimp weakling who doubts himself, but over time he becomes this really strong, confident, powerful dude who you're just rooting for and who's just super awesome. You got Aladdin, who's got this like childlike innocence to him, although he's a super powerful being and he just doesn't quite know it yet. He kind of has to come into his own, and he's got to train himself, he's got to train his magic and all that. You got Morgiana, like I say, with the super powerful legs and like superhuman strength, and she lived most of her life as a slave and she felt worthless and meaningless. And I'm not gonna go on a crazy Kanye rant and say that slavery was a choice, but in Morgiana's case it kind of was. She was broken down mentally, whereas she could have easily broken out of her chains and escaped, but she didn't feel like it. She didn't feel worthy, she didn't feel able, even though she totally was. And so she's got to kind of learn to find her identity as a free person and find some self-worth. And she finds a lot of healing in her friends. And I haven't talked about everyone's favorite character yet, Sinbad. Sinbad is just this like world famous adventurer, conqueror of 7 dungeons. He's got all these different powers from all these different metal vessels. Super smart, cunning dude. All the ladies love him. He's known as the, what was it? The womanizer of the 7 seas at one point. Definitely playboy kind of guy, but super strong, like most powerful character in the universe pretty much. And he's got his own kingdom, and he's just this awesome king and awesome person. And yeah, him and Morgiana are like up there tied for a favorite character. Sinbad actually got his own spin-off. It's a prequel. You get to check out his adventures as a young man. I haven't watched the spin-off yet, but it's called Magi, Adventure of Sinbad, I think. Whereas the Magi series, where Sinbad is more of a side character, he was just popular enough to get his own show. He was freaking awesome. And it was fun watching on Crunchyroll and reading the comments from like 10 years ago. People were like, you know, I wouldn't mind just watching a show about Sinbad. Well, now you can. But yeah, the more I watched this show, the more I just couldn't stop watching this show. And like I say, time and time again, it just impressed me with the way it was written. Yeah, the fight scenes get better and better. The character development goes deeper and deeper. It gets complex, man. It doesn't drag out too long. It's only 2 seasons long, plus that other spin-off. But you know what? I really would have enjoyed a 3rd season. I think there was so many other places it could have gone. At the same time, I like a shorter series that doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't go into needlessly lengthy, bloated story arcs. That's another thing. The pacing in this show I felt was really good. Each story arc is pretty short. It moves really quickly. One story arc might be a few episodes or something. I don't know how closely it stayed to the manga. Again, in the Crunchyroll comments, I was seeing some complaints from manga readers like, they've strayed so much at this point, I don't know if I'm going to keep watching. But overwhelmingly, the majority was just all into this thing, start to finish. Man, what a devoted fan base it had at the time. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about this show anymore. It's almost a decade old, but man, I'm so glad I watched it. And if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it, man. It's on Crunchyroll. I think it's on Netflix, other places as well, depending where you live and when you're watching this video now. But yeah, Magi, absolutely loved this series. Blew my mind. Go watch it. Anyways, let me know your opinions, and thank you so much for watching today. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.